Alright folks, if you're just tuning in, this is Marcus Hale, your nocturnal guide through another quiet night in Crescent City. I was about to cue up another track when the station trembled. Subtle at first, like the hum of a passing truck, but then stronger. My coffee cup rattled against the console. You ever feel something before you hear it? That's what happened. A deep rolling pressure. Not a sound exactly, but something your bones register before your brain does. Now, earthquakes aren't unheard of around here. We sit along the subduction zone where the Pacific plate grinds against the North American, a geological ticking clock. But this wasn't a typical tremor. The usual pattern is a sharp jolt or a slow roll, depending on the depth and break. This was layered. A vibration underneath a vibration, like something shifting far below us, but not all at once. I checked the USGS feed. Nothing registered. No seismic spikes, no alerts. Strange, considering half the city must have felt it. Then the calls started coming in. First, from the docks, longshoremen reporting that the water looked wrong. Not just choppy, but moving against the wind, pulsing inland like the ocean was breathing. Then, a trucker on Highway 1 phoned in, swearing he saw the lights of a cargo ship flicker and vanish, just gone. No explosion, no distress call, just a brief power surge and darkness. Now here's where it gets unsettling. About 15 minutes ago, a signal came through on our emergency frequency, one of those automated pings meant for distress situations. It originated from an offshore research platform, latitude 37.6, longitude, well, let's just say, out in deep water. Normally, I wouldn't even have access to that frequency, but for reasons above my pay grade, it bled into our system. And the sound, it wasn't a distress call in the traditional sense. No voice, no coordinates, just this, resonance. Low, methodical, rhythmic, a pulse that didn't belong to any known emergency beacon. I ran it through the station's analyzer, and I wish I hadn't. It wasn't digital, it was organic. Now, before you write me off as some late-night crackpot, let's look at the facts. Something massive moved beneath us. The ocean responded. A ship went dark, and a signal, unlike anything on record, made its way into a system it had no business being in. Coincidence? Maybe. But here's what sent a chill through me. Before that signal cut out, before the static swallowed it whole, something else came through. A second frequency, riding the first like an echo. A distortion that sounded almost intentional. The last time humanity mistook a pattern in nature for coincidence, we learned the hard way that the universe doesn't care about our assumptions. Pulsars, deep-sea bioluminescence, species we swore were extinct. Our ignorance is always louder than the truth until the truth shouts back. And right now, I think something just did. Hold on, more updates coming in. The Coast Guard has deployed reconnaissance vessels to the last known location of that cargo ship. But here's the kicker. They're already reporting instrument failures. Compasses swinging wild, GPS desynchronized. The kind of disruption you'd expect from a strong electromagnetic field, except this isn't a storm, and there's no solar activity to explain it. If this interference is coming from below, we're dealing with something far beyond our understanding. I don't know about you, but I can feel it. That sense, primal and buried deep, telling us we've overstayed our welcome. I don't know what's out there, but whatever it is, it's awake. Stay with me, Crescent City. This night isn't over. This is Marcus Hale, still broadcasting live from Crescent City, and I wish I had better news. But if you're listening, you already know, something is happening. Something big, and it's not stopping. Let me take you back to what's unfolded in just the last hour. That cargo ship, the one that vanished off the Pacific, it didn't just disappear, it was taken. Coast Guard reconnaissance planes managed to get visuals before their instruments failed. They relayed what they saw before radio silence swallowed them whole. According to their last transmission, the ship wasn't wrecked, wasn't capsized. It was lifted, hauled out of the water like a toy in a giant's hand, then dragged beneath the waves. That's not all, there's something else. Something the authorities aren't sharing yet, but I've got my own sources and they're scared. This thing, whatever it is moving, and not randomly. It's following a trajectory, a direct path. And if you trace that line inland, it leads straight to us. Now I know what you're thinking. How? How does something that big, that powerful, go unseen until now? Here's the terrifying answer. It hasn't. We just haven't been looking in the right way. I spent the last 20 minutes combing through old oceanographic reports, digging through seismic anomalies that never lined up with known fault lines or volcanic activity. And I found something. There have been patterns. Data points scattered across decades, huge inexplicable shifts in water displacement, massive low-frequency disturbances deep below the thermocline. What does that mean? It means something was always there, dormant, waiting, and tonight, for the first time, it broke the surface. Folks, I just received another transmission. This one wasn't from an official channel. It came from a rogue signal, bouncing through unsecured networks, likely a researcher trying to get the word out before someone shuts them down. The message was brief, fragmented, but I caught two crucial words: biomechanical adaptation. That changes everything. If we're dealing with something not just biological, but something that has evolved in response to modern threats, then we're up against an apex entity, a predator shaped by an environment we don't even understand. Think about it. Deep-sea organisms already defy what we thought life was capable of. There are creatures in the abyss that withstand pressures that would crush a submarine. Life that generates its own light in total darkness, that feeds off chemical vents where no sunlight ever reaches. And if something has survived down there long enough, evolving alongside our own advancements, then it's not just an animal. It's an answer to whatever threatens its domain. Which brings me to something even more unsettling. Remember that strange organic signal I picked up? The pulse that interfered with my station? It's getting stronger, louder, and I'm not the only one hearing it. Reports are flooding in from all over the coast, strange resonances disrupting radio towers, low vibrations rattling through the ocean floor. It's affecting migratory patterns. Birds are moving inland, schools of fish breaking apart in chaotic bursts. This isn't just some random attack. This thing is communicating. But with what? I need you all to understand something. This isn't a monster movie. This isn't some freak occurrence we can explain away in a news cycle. This is a waking force, something ancient, something calculated, and it is making contact with our world in a way we never anticipated. There's an update from the military. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep access to this channel, but I'm listening in now. Fighter jets have been scrambled, the Navy is mobilizing. But here's the problem. They still don't know what they're dealing with. The official statement is calling it an unidentified subaqueous entity. That's fancy talk for, we have no damn clue. They're deploying sonar scans, but they're coming back distorted. Some kind of interference is messing with their readings and they can't get a full image. But they know one thing for sure. It's getting closer. We've all grown up with the idea that we've mapped this planet, that we've conquered every peak, measured every depth, mastered every environment. But the truth is, we've only skimmed the surface. The deepest parts of the ocean, we've explored less than 5%. The rest, that's a void we've never truly understood. And now, something from that void has decided to introduce itself. More reports are coming in now, coastal blackouts, entire grids going dark along the shoreline. A full power outage just hit the naval base. That's no coincidence. If this thing is emitting electromagnetic interference, if it's disrupting power systems, then it's not just physically dominant, it's affecting technology itself. That means modern weapons might be useless against it. I'm watching the city from my booth. The skyline is still intact, but the streets below are shifting. People know something is wrong. You can feel it in the air, A pressure, a weight, like the sky itself is waiting to crack open. To anyone listening, stay inside, stay off the roads. If you're near the water, get away from it now. I don't know what's coming next, but if the pattern holds, if that trajectory remains the same, then Crescent City isn't just in the path of something big. We're in the middle of its awakening, and it's already here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll keep broadcasting as long as I can. Someone has to document this, to tell the truth before the world decides what version it wants to believe. Stay with me. Stay alert. And if you hear something that doesn't sound human, you might not be alone. This is Marcus Hale, coming at you live with details that defy our current understanding of the natural order. In the hours since our first reports, a pattern has emerged, a disturbing rationality behind the creature's actions. At first, the chaos seemed random, an unpredictable force of nature. But as I monitored live feeds and analyzed the data from military and scientific sources, it became apparent that this entity is not acting on mere instinct or blind rage. Instead, its movements suggest a calculated response, one governed by principles that we are only beginning to fathom. I've spent countless moments cross-referencing real-time sonar anomalies with oceanographic records, and what I've found challenges every assumption we've held about the deep. Traditional seismic readings showed nothing out of the ordinary, yet the beast's presence was unmistakable, its mass moving with deliberate precision along corridors of altered pressure and fluctuating electromagnetic fields. The very fabric of the ocean appears to respond to its passage, as if the creature taps into an intricate network of underwater energy gradients. This isn't the behavior of a simple animal. It is as if the being itself is an arbiter of an ancient natural law. For those who follow scientific inquiry, consider the theory of deep-sea gigantism, where the scarcity of predators and the abundance of undisturbed resources allow certain species to reach sizes unimaginable in shallower waters. Here, in the pitch-black depths where pressure mounts to extreme levels, evolutionary pressures can yield organisms that integrate organic structures with mineral fortifications. The creature's external armor, which deflects modern sensor readings and appears to blend biological tissue with crystalline deposits, is a testament to millions of years of adaptation. Its defensive composition resembles a natural composite, much like how mollusk shells are structured for resilience, only magnified on an extraordinary scale. I've observed that when fighter jets and naval forces attempt to engage this colossus, their missiles and electronic systems are rendered ineffective. Instead of a chaotic barrage of random strikes, each failed attempt points to the creature's sophisticated defensive mechanisms. It seems to generate localized fields that disrupt conventional electromagnetic signals. In layman's terms, it's as if the beast has harnessed a form of bioelectric countermeasure, one that neutralizes our modern technology. This phenomenon may be rooted in bioluminescent and electrogenic capabilities found in certain deep-sea species, only amplified beyond our current scientific models. Moreover, the creature's path is not arbitrary. Its trajectory follows a distinct set of coordinates that correspond with natural energy hotspots, zones where the Earth's magnetic field intersects with deep thermal vents and chemical plumes. It pauses momentarily in these regions, almost as if it is recalibrating its own internal processes before accelerating with bursts of kinetic energy. I've noted that the vessel logs and environmental sensors at coastal installations register subtle but measurable shifts in temperature and pressure as it passes overhead. Such data, though fragmentary, reinforces the idea that this entity is inextricably linked with the fundamental dynamics of the ocean. In conversations with leading marine biologists, a common hypothesis has emerged that this creature represents an evolutionary convergence of biological resilience and environmental symbiosis. In the isolated and extreme conditions of the ocean's abyss, life can evolve along paths that mirror engineered systems, self-repairing, self-regulating, and capable of interfacing with their surroundings in ways that are foreign to surface-dwelling species. Imagine a living network where every cell, every structural element, plays a role in maintaining equilibrium. The beast's actions suggest it is not merely a predator or a random anomaly, but rather an organism that seeks to restore balance in an ecosystem pushed to its limits by human interference and natural cyclic forces. I have also been following reports of localized electromagnetic disturbances, which coincide with the creature's movements. These disruptions are not random static, but exhibit a precise periodicity. When I plotted these disturbances on a time sequence map of our coastal sensors, a pattern emerged that mirrors the natural oscillations observed in geomagnetic storms. Only these pulses are emanating from the very entity that now commands our attention. It appears that its internal processes might be using, or even generating, electromagnetic energy to communicate or navigate. This is not something we have encountered before in terrestrial life, and it suggests a level of complexity that borders on what we might call a natural intelligence. As I relay these findings to you, I must stress that our understanding remains rudimentary. The creature's methodical approach, its ability to interact with the environment on both a biological and physical level, and its apparent intent in choosing specific targets all point toward a logic that is as ancient as it is advanced. In its wake, it leaves behind disrupted electronics, altered marine currents, and a trail of unanswered questions. The beast does not simply wreak havoc, it seems to be sending a message, a clear indication that the rules governing life in the deep are not to be trifled with. I stand here in the control booth, absorbing every anomaly, every fragment of data that flows in through our compromised systems. The revelations I'm witnessing compel us to rethink our place in this delicate, interwoven ecosystem. The creature's deliberate actions challenge the notion that human technology and progress have cornered nature. Instead, it hints at an equilibrium, maintained by forces that are as much biological as they are geological and electromagnetic. So to every listener out there clinging to your radios in these uncertain moments, know this: we are not merely facing a rogue monster. We are witnessing the manifestation of nature's own logic, a force that has evolved over epochs, honed by the relentless pressures of survival in an environment that few of us have ever truly explored. And as its calculated march continues, it becomes clear that our actions have long-term consequences. The beast's logic is a reminder that the natural world operates on principles far beyond our current comprehension. And sometimes those principles manifest in ways that force us to re-examine the very foundations of what we consider normal. I'll keep this channel open, documenting every development as it unfolds. We may be at the brink of an unprecedented encounter with an ancient force, but we owe it to ourselves to observe, to learn, and perhaps to understand. This is Marcus Hale, signing off momentarily to recalibrate my instruments. Stay tuned. There is so much more to come as the night deepens. This is Marcus Hale, broadcasting live. If you're still listening, if you haven't lost power, haven't gone underground, or been forced into silence like so many others, then you need to hear this. The creature is speaking. Not in words, not in anything we can immediately understand, but in a sound that shakes everything it touches. A frequency that bends the very air around it, that rattles the bones inside your chest and makes your skin feel like it's humming. It started roughly 20 minutes ago, just after the last military engagement failed. And I do mean failed. I had a direct feed from an observation drone stationed along the coast, its signal bouncing through military relays before it was cut. The jets fired everything they had, long-range missiles, anti-ship torpedoes, even classified weapons I don't have names for. Some detonated before impact, scattering shockwaves across the ocean's surface. Some connected, but when the smoke cleared, the creature was still there, unbothered. And then it responded. That's when we heard it. At first, it was subtle, a deep resonance rolling beneath everything, like the lowest note of an organ played underwater. It spread outward in all directions, passing through water, through air, through concrete and steel. The drone feed glitched, its image fracturing as the signal wavered. The fighter pilot started reporting dizziness, nausea, then radio silence. The planes dropped from the sky, not because they were shot down, not because something physical hit them, but because the very fabric of their control systems failed. Their instruments shorted out, their guidance systems corrupted. Pilots lost consciousness mid-air, as if their very minds were affected by the resonance. 3 jets crashed into the water. One spiraled inland and slammed into the outskirts of Crescent City, setting half a neighborhood ablaze. And all the while, the sound continued. I need you to understand, this isn't just noise, it's directed. It's a signal, deliberate and refined, like an auditory weapon tuned to disrupt everything we rely on. Our technology, our communication, our very ability to function. I've been analyzing the frequency through my station's equipment, though every attempt to capture a clean recording has ended in system failures. The wavelength isn't consistent. It oscillates in complex, layered harmonics, as if transmitting multiple forms of information at once. It reminds me of whale songs, how different species communicate across vast distances through intricate patterns of frequency shifts. But this is something else, something far more advanced. And it's not just affecting electronics, it's affecting us. I've spoken to people across the city, scientists, radio engineers, ordinary civilians, and the reports are eerily similar. Those exposed to the full force of the sound experience symptoms. It starts as a deep pressure in the skull, a vibration behind the eyes, then a creeping sense of disorientation, as if your body no longer fully belongs to you. Some describe hearing phantom whispers layered beneath the main tone, like voices calling from beneath the surface of a deep well. Others report fleeting, impossible visions, shadows moving where there should be none, shapes lurking at the edge of perception. And then there are the ones who collapse. Hospitals are overwhelmed. The emergency rooms are filled with people who suddenly lost consciousness, their bodies unresponsive yet showing no clear signs of injury. Some wake up minutes later, confused and shaken. Others remain catatonic, their brain activity fluctuating in erratic waves, as if something has rewired their neural patterns. Whatever this sound is, it's doing more than breaking glass and knocking out power grids. It's reaching into us, changing us in ways we can't yet understand. I've been monitoring seismic activity since this started, and something terrifying is emerging. The sound waves are resonating with the Earth itself, causing tremors along fault lines that haven't been active in centuries. It's as if the very crust of the planet is responding. This isn't an attack in the conventional sense. It's a pulse, a frequency that's waking something up, or maybe calling something else. I don't think the creature is alone. There's a pattern in its sound, intervals between pulses that grow shorter, more urgent. It's not just making noise, it's sending a message. To what? To who? I don't know yet, but I have a feeling we're about to find out. The coastline is changing. Water levels are shifting in unnatural ways, receding in places they shouldn't, surging where they normally remain calm. Oceanographic buoys hundreds of miles offshore have detected massive shifts in temperature and pressure, hotter currents rising from the abyss, as if something is disturbing thermal vents at the bottom of the sea. And the marine life, they're running. Every fish, every cetacean, every living thing that usually thrives in these waters is fleeing en masse, moving toward open ocean, away from whatever is coming. That alone should terrify us, because animals don't run without a reason. They know. I've been watching the skyline. The city's power grid is failing in pulses now, flickering in and out like a dying heartbeat. Emergency vehicles crisscross the streets, but it's clear no one has control anymore. People are leaving their homes, gathering in open spaces, as if instinctively understanding that confinement is no longer safe. And above it all, the sound continues, low, deep, unrelenting. I feel it inside me. Not just as something I hear, but as something pressing against my very thoughts, shaping the air around me, making every moment feel stretched and unreal. I have to stay focused. I have to keep broadcasting. Someone has to document this. Someone has to make sure this moment isn't rewritten, isn't sanitized by whatever authorities survive the night. This is bigger than Crescent City, bigger than the coast. The creature has been silent for untold centuries, buried beneath pressures we could never survive, hidden beyond our reach. But something changed. Something forced it to the surface, made it break the boundary between its world and ours. And now it's calling. The only question left is, who's gonna answer? I'll stay on the air as long as I can. If you're out there, if you can still hear me, listen. Not just with your ears, but with your instincts. Because the sound isn't just noise, it's a warning. This is Marcus Hale. If you're still listening, if you can still hear my voice, stay with me. Because I think I've found something. I spent the last hour dissecting the sound, running it through every frequency filter I could manage with my failing equipment. The interference is getting worse, but I managed to isolate patterns buried beneath the main resonance. And what I found, it changes everything. This sound isn't random. It isn't just some natural vocalization from a deep-sea colossus. It has structure, and not just the kind we see in whale songs or seismic events. It has repeating waveforms, layered harmonics that resemble something I never thought I'd see outside of classified military archives. Encrypted data. That's right. This thing, this creature, this force, it's not just making noise, it's transmitting something. I cross-checked the patterns against everything I could access. Military ciphers, known transmission methods, even old Cold War era number stations. And while it doesn't match any human code precisely, the resemblance is undeniable. The repetition, the nested loops, the way certain sequences escalate in intervals that mimic computational logic rather than biological communication. This is an artificial pattern. I need you to understand what that means. It means intelligence. It means intent. It means that this sound, this force that's been shattering windows, shorting out technology and dropping pilots from the sky, this thing is saying something. And if it's saying something, then we have to ask, who is it speaking to? Or maybe the better question is, who designed it? Because there's another problem. I've been digging through scientific records, old oceanographic logs, even classified leaks that should have never reached the public. And there's something in them, a recurring anomaly that no one ever pieced together until now. Every few decades, certain deep-sea monitoring stations pick up signals that shouldn't exist. Low-frequency pulses, too structured to be tectonic, too deep to be biological. They always dismiss them. Equipment malfunctions, underwater volcanic activity, migrating marine life, the usual excuses. But I've matched some of those archived recordings to the patterns I'm seeing now. This thing has spoken before. Not recently, not in a way we could understand, but across the last century it has sent brief, distorted signals from the deepest parts of the ocean. Each time it went unanswered. Each time it eventually fell silent again, until now. And that raises the next most terrifying possibility. What if it wasn't waiting for us to respond? What if it was waiting for someone else? Or worse, what if something else finally answered back? Because here's the thing, this isn't just a creature. This isn't just some unknown species that happened to grow too large in the abyss. The more I analyze the patterns, the more I realize that this thing doesn't just interact with its environment. It manipulates it. The electromagnetic disruptions, the seismic tremors, the way water levels shift in unnatural ways, it's not just reacting to the world around it, it's shaping it. As if it was designed to... I know how that sounds. I know I must sound insane, like I've been holed up in this radio station too long, watching the world unravel through static and corrupted video feeds. But listen to me. Every instinct I have is screaming that we are looking at something far, far beyond anything we've ever encountered. Because the final piece, the thing that made my blood run cold, was buried in declassified naval records from the 1970s. There was an incident, an unsolved event in the North Pacific. A submarine went missing, vanished without a trace, not a single distress signal sent. The last recorded log entry before contact was lost mentioned a sudden, impossible reading. A thermal spike rising from the seafloor at a depth where no known geological activity should exist. The location? Almost exactly where the creature surfaced. The Navy covered it up. They said it was a mechanical failure, wrote off the entire crew. But now, knowing what I know, I think they found something down there. Or worse, something found them. And maybe, just maybe, we're not looking at an ancient creature at all. Maybe we're looking at something that was never supposed to wake up. The unnatural truth is this. Everything we thought we knew about our world has been incomplete. We have probed the depths of space, searched for signals among the stars, and yet we never considered that something might have been waiting here all along, buried beneath pressures no man could survive, hidden in a part of the world we barely understand. And if this thing is calling out now, if it's transmitting something that our technology can barely process, then we have to ask, did we wake it up, or did something else? Because there's one last anomaly I haven't shared yet. A new transmission just came through on the emergency channels, coded military chatter from an unknown source. Someone is trying to jam the creature's signal, to interfere with its resonance using counter frequencies. But the moment they started, the sound changed, not just in pitch or frequency, not just in power. It became angry. The pulses intensified, the electromagnetic interference surged, and then for exactly 47 seconds, the entire city lost power. And in that darkness, people reported seeing things, shapes moving where they shouldn't, distortions in the air like heat ripples, except they were everywhere. And when the power came back, some of those people, they didn't wake up. Not dead, not injured, just gone. Like their bodies were still there, but their minds had been scrubbed out. And now I'm sitting here, staring at the waveform of the sound on my monitor, watching it shift, watching it evolve. This thing is adapting, and I don't think it's done yet. If you can still hear me, if you're still out there, stay inside. Stay in the dark. Because the more I listen to this thing, the more I realize it doesn't just make sound. It sees with it. And the moment we tried to fight back, it started looking for us. This is Marcus Hale, signing off for now, but I'll be back if I can. Just keep listening. This is Marcus Hale, I'm still here, and I need you to listen. The creature is changing, or worse, it's learning. I've spent the last few hours analyzing the patterns, tracking every shift in its signal, every new anomaly spreading through the city. And I'm telling you now, with every ounce of certainty I have left, this thing isn't just reacting, it's adapting. And that means we were wrong. We thought it was a relic, a prehistoric nightmare, something long buried, something that should have never seen the light of day. We assumed it was just another product of deep-time evolution, some lost apex predator clawing its way back into a world that had long forgotten it. But evolution doesn't work like this. Not this fast, not this precisely, not like it knows we're here. It started small, subtle changes, shifts in its vocalization, minor adjustments in frequency, as if it were fine-tuning its effect. At first I thought it was just random variance, fluctuations in a biological system under stress. But then I noticed the pattern. Whenever our technology fought back, whenever someone tried to scramble its signal or interfere with its pulse, it compensated. The moment we tried jamming it, it changed its pitch. When the military launched low-frequency counterwaves, It folded them into its own resonance. It wasn't just pushing back, it was integrating. The reports began trickling in from all over the city, people hearing the sound in different ways, not just as noise, but as something intimate. At first, it was the usual effects: dizziness, nausea, the deep bone resonance that made people feel like their skulls were vibrating from the inside out. But then it changed. People started hearing voices. I've spoken to a dozen people now, and their stories are identical. Each one swears they've heard their own voice whispering in their ears, repeating words they'd never spoken aloud, fragments of thoughts they'd kept private, memories they hadn't touched in years. One woman claimed she heard her mother's voice, even though her mother had been dead for over a decade. A paramedic told me he heard himself, but younger, a childhood version of his own voice, crying for help. And then there are the ones who heard nothing at all. These are the ones that worry me most, because the ones who heard nothing, who didn't feel the pulse, who didn't experience the resonance, they're the ones who started changing. I don't know how else to describe it. At first, they just seemed distant, unaffected, maybe even relieved, like they had somehow adapted where everyone else had suffered. But the longer I watched, the more I realized something was wrong. Their movements became too smooth, too precise, like they were imitating what human movement should look like, instead of actually feeling it. Their speech patterns became rigid, as if every word was being carefully selected. And their eyes, I don't know if I'm imagining it. I don't know if the exhaustion is getting to me, if the lack of sleep is turning paranoia into certainty. But I swear when I spoke to one of them, I saw something behind their stare, like they were looking through me, not at me, like I wasn't a person, just a collection of data they were trying to process. Something is happening to them, and I don't think they're people anymore. I've been monitoring their behavior. The military has too, though they're keeping quiet about it. The ones who aren't affected, the ones who should be suffering like the rest of us, they're gathering. Slowly, subtly, as if drawn together by some unseen thread. I watched from my station window as 3 of them walked past, silent, synchronized, moving in perfect step without a single glance toward one another. They didn't speak, didn't look at their phones, didn't react to the chaos unfolding around them. They just walked. Like they knew where they were going, like they had been called. This isn't evolution. This isn't survival of the fittest. This is something else entirely, something older, something designed. I've gone through every evolutionary model, every possible explanation for how a creature could evolve something like this, and none of them fit. Natural selection doesn't produce species that can adapt to an entirely new sensory domain in minutes. It doesn't create beings that can manipulate sound, electromagnetic fields, and neurological function all at once. Which means only one thing. It was built. And if it was built, then who built it? I don't have that answer. Not yet. But I do know one thing. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. I found records, old ones, buried in the archives of scientific journals, passed off as anomalies, unexplained mysteries that were quickly forgotten, patterns of disruption, small, localized events where groups of people displayed strange collective behavior before disappearing entirely. An abandoned whaling station in the Arctic, where an entire crew left their posts and walked into the ice without explanation. A deep-sea drilling platform in the Indian Ocean that lost all radio contact before its workers were found floating in the water, unresponsive but alive. A research vessel near the Mariana Trench where half the crew simply stopped speaking, sitting in silence for days, staring at something no one else could see. And in every case, the same frequency. Not as strong, not as refined, but present, like something was testing us. And now the test is over. The real thing is here, and it's no longer just watching. It's choosing. I need you to listen to me, whoever you are, wherever you are. If you start hearing the voices, if you start feeling that hum in your bones, if you suddenly feel nothing at all, get away. Get as far away from people as you can. Because I think this thing is selecting for something. I think it's looking for a specific type of person. And when it finds enough of them, I don't think we're gonna like what happens next. I'll keep broadcasting as long as I can, but the interference is getting worse. The lights in the station flicker more often now, and every time I close my eyes, I swear I can hear my own voice whispering back at me from the static. If this is evolution, then we were never at the top. This is Marcus Hale. If you're still out there, if you can still hear me, then listen carefully. This might be the last time I get to say anything at all. I had to leave the station. I held out as long as I could, but the power failures kept getting worse. The interference from the creature's signal wasn't just disrupting electronics anymore, it was rewriting them. Every screen, every speaker, every piece of technology I tried to use was filled with nothing but distorted images and strange, looping sounds. Not just random noise, familiar sounds. My own voice, chopped up, rearranged, played back to me in ways I never spoke. And then the power just stopped coming back on. I was broadcasting into dead air. So I left, took what I could carry, some old analog gear, a backup transmitter, a portable generator, and I ran. The streets were empty, not because the city had evacuated, but because the people left behind weren't people anymore. I saw them, the ones who'd been changed. They weren't dead. They weren't even sick. They were just wrong. Their movements were too smooth, too deliberate. They didn't blink as much as they should. They walked in straight lines, always moving towards something I couldn't see. Some of them just stood there, heads tilted slightly upward, as if waiting for an answer to a question they'd never spoken aloud. And the worst part, some of them still called out for help. I heard them as I moved through the city, cries for assistance, for rescue, for someone, anyone, to get them to safety. But the voices were off, too flat, too rehearsed, and they never looked directly at me when they spoke, only in my direction, like they were waiting for me to react, like they were testing if I'd respond. I didn't. I kept moving. The deeper I went, the worse it got. The buildings felt wrong, walls humming with that deep, resonant frequency, metal structures vibrating just enough to be noticed. Any piece of exposed glass or plastic showed distortions, not cracks or warping, but shifting. As if the material itself was trying to mimic something it couldn't quite grasp. And the sky, it wasn't supposed to look like that. The clouds weren't moving right. They hovered in place, stretched and frozen like someone had taken a photograph of a storm and just pinned it there. And every now and then a ripple passed through them, a distortion like heat waves rising off asphalt. Except it wasn't heat, it was something else, something pushing through. I don't know how far the effect has spread, but the city isn't safe anymore. So I found a shelter. Not the kind you're thinking of, no government outpost, no reinforced bunker stocked with supplies. No, those places are gone, either evacuated or compromised. The last real shelter isn't a place, it's silence. I holed up in an old underground parking garage, deep enough that the sound doesn't reach as easily. The concrete and steel dull the vibrations. It's not perfect. I can still feel the hum in my bones when I stay in one place too long, but it's quieter. And quiet is survival. That's what I've learned. The sound, the resonance, the transmission, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't just affect machines. It doesn't just break electronics or scramble signals. It listens, it searches. And when it finds you, it doesn't just take you. It changes you. The people who've fallen under its influence aren't mindless. They aren't brainwashed or hypnotized. There's something new. Something that understands us but isn't us anymore. And the worst part, I think they know I'm still broadcasting. I've kept my signal low power, analog only, bouncing between frequencies to stay hidden. But earlier, when I adjusted the transmitter, I picked up something else. Not my voice, not static, it was them. A chorus of voices layered on top of each other, whispering, repeating, overlapping in ways that shouldn't be possible. At first I thought it was recordings, echoes of the people it had already taken. But then I heard my own name, Marcus, not just once, over and over. Hundreds of voices, all saying my name at different speeds, different tones, some familiar, some impossible. And then buried beneath them all, we see you. I shut it off. I pulled the plug, shut down everything, sat there in the dark, my breath loud enough to betray me if anyone, anything was listening. And that's when I realized, it wasn't their voices I was hearing, it was mine. All of them were me. Hundreds, thousands of versions of my own voice, speaking to me in the same fractured cadence I had heard in the others. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I know what it means. The signal doesn't just change people, it copies them. It learns, it adapts, and then when it understands them enough, it replaces them. That's what happened to the people out there, the ones still walking, still moving, still acting like people. They aren't possessed. They aren't infected. They've been duplicated. Their minds taken apart, rewritten, rebuilt into something else entirely. And now they're spreading. I don't think they even know they've changed. And the real ones? The ones who haven't been rewritten yet, they're disappearing. I've stopped seeing signs of the unaffected. The last people I ran into, real people, scared, desperate, human, they were taken within hours. Not by force, not by violence. They just gave in. I watched it happen. A man and his wife hiding in the same building I was using to rest. They were whispering, trying to stay quiet, but the sound found them anyway. It came through the walls, through the floor, through them. And suddenly, they just stopped talking. She looked at him. He looked at her. And then they walked away, together, not running, not afraid, just accepting. And the moment they stepped outside, the others were waiting. I left after that. I had to. So now I'm here, in the last shelter I could find, trying to block out the sound, trying to hold on to whatever makes me me for as long as I can. I don't know how much longer I have. Not before they find me. Not before it finds me. Because the worst part, the part I haven't admitted until now, I've started hearing my own voice again. Not through the radio, not through speakers, inside my own head. I don't know if I'm still real. I don't know if I'm still me. But I'll keep fighting. I'll keep running, and I'll keep talking. As long as you can hear me, as long as my voice still means something, as long as I can hold on to whatever is left of Marcus Hale, I'll keep broadcasting. Even if the next time you hear me, it isn't really me at all. This is Marcus Hale. If you're still listening, then maybe I'm still real. Maybe I'm still me. But I can't promise that for much longer. I think I know what this thing is now. Or at least I know what it was. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't some anomaly that crawled out of the ocean or a cosmic fluke that landed here by chance. No, this thing, this signal, this force was made. And not just made, it was tested, experimented on, and someone, somewhere realized they had created something they couldn't control. So they buried it, sealed it away beneath the world and prayed it would never wake up. But nothing stays buried forever. I found the facility. I didn't mean to. I was just trying to get further away, deeper underground, away from the sound, away from them. The ones who still look human but aren't. I thought maybe if I got far enough down, the layers of rock and steel would block it out completely. But instead, I found something worse. The walls weren't concrete, not like the parking garages or tunnels I'd used before. These were reinforced with something else, something I didn't recognize. I could see the scars of old security measures, blast doors warped by time, keypads melted from some kind of heat, long dead warning lights still locked in the moment they failed. And the deeper I went, the clearer it became. This place wasn't abandoned. It was silenced. The air smelled wrong, like burnt metal and decay, and the dust didn't settle naturally. It hung in the air, disturbed by something that wasn't wind. And the deeper I went, the more I felt it, that hum, that impossible resonant vibration that I thought I'd escaped. But it wasn't coming from above. It was underneath. I was walking straight into the heart of it. There were no bodies. That was the first thing that unsettled me. A place like this, a place built to contain something, should have been filled with the remains of the people who tried. But there was nothing. No bones, no uniforms, not even signs of struggle. Just empty rooms filled with half-decayed equipment, shattered screens, and files that had been deliberately destroyed. Whatever happened here, someone tried to erase it. They failed. I found what they left behind, the pieces they couldn't destroy. The old servers were still intact, though gutted, their drives removed or fried beyond recognition. But they had physical logs, real paper. Whoever was in charge must have known that digital records wouldn't be safe. And the notes. Jesus, the notes. They weren't researching the creature itself. Not at first. They were researching its effect on us. The dates stretched back decades. Some were coded, classified beyond anything I'd ever seen, but the patterns were obvious. The earliest records described unidentified frequencies, signals that shouldn't have existed, pulses buried deep beneath seismic activity, mimicking the structure of living brainwaves. It wasn't just noise, it was communication, and someone wanted to understand it. The first experiments were small. Contained animals, isolated test environments, attempts to decipher the patterns in controlled conditions. They tried everything: sonic mapping, reverse signal engineering, even direct neurological interfacing. But they were too slow, because the thing on the other end, it was already listening. The moment they acknowledged it, the moment they pushed back, it learned. The tests became unreliable. Observers began reporting anomalies, echoes in recordings that weren't there before, messages in their own handwriting they didn't remember writing. And then the voices started. Familiar voices. They shut down the project, ordered everything erased, destroyed, sealed, but it didn't matter. The moment they made contact, the moment they reached into it, they had already lost, because it reached back. And then something happened, something they didn't expect. It changed. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being just a signal. It became physical. They didn't know how, didn't know why, but the notes described something forming. Not just an effect, not just an influence, but a presence. A body. A structure that could bend and shift and expand, made of something that wasn't entirely matter, something that thought the way sound thinks, that moved the way waves move. And it didn't just adapt to its environment, it rewrote it. That's why the city changed. That's why the people changed. This thing isn't just learning, it's rewriting reality. And the worst part, it was never meant to be released. Not naturally. Not by time or erosion or accident. Something, someone, let it out. The file stopped abruptly. No closure, no final reports, just a last, frantic set of notes scrawled into the margins of an unfinished document. 4 words, not a warning, not a farewell. It doesn't need us. And that's when I heard the sound again, not from above, not from the facility, from inside my own head. The hum, the resonance, that impossible echoing pulse, it was speaking. Not in words, not in sentences, but in patterns. I don't know how long I stood there, listening, maybe minutes, maybe hours, and then I felt it. Something was watching me. Not a person, not a creature, but the air itself, the walls, the floors, the dust. Everything felt like it was waiting, like the entire world had turned its attention directly onto me. I ran. I don't even remember how I got out. I just ran. Up through the tunnels, through the ruined stairwells, past the empty corridors where nothing alive had walked in years. The hum followed me, growing louder, the sound bending around me, inside me, through me. It knew I had seen. It knew I had understood. And it was offended. Now I'm here, back in the ruins of the city, hiding in a place that won't keep me safe for long. I don't know how much time I have left before the sound finds me again, before it decides that I've heard too much. Because I know what this was now. Not an invasion, not an accident, a failed experiment, and I am nothing more than another variable in its next test. This is Marcus Hale. If you can hear me, then maybe I can still fight this. Maybe I can still hold on, but I don't know for how much longer. The city is gone. Not just in the way we understand destruction, collapsing buildings, fires, the ruin left in the wake of disaster. No, this is something else. This is erasure. Streets that were there yesterday are not there today. Structures shift when I turn away, like the world is a chalk drawing and something keeps smearing the edges. I pass by a building I know I've seen before, but its doors are in different places, its windows warped, its insides wrong. I don't think reality is stable anymore. And I think I'm the last one left to tell you. I don't know when it happened exactly. The change wasn't sudden. It was gradual, insidious, like a disease creeping through the city's bones. People disappeared, but not all at once. It started with the ones who heard the sound too many times, the ones who listened too deeply. Their bodies were the first to go, folding into something unrecognizable. Then the ones who didn't listen at all, who refused to acknowledge what was happening, who clung to logic and reason even as the world around them rejected it. They simply faded, one by one, gone like they were never there. And the ones who changed, they aren't people anymore. I've seen them walking, not with purpose, not with recognition, just existing in a way that feels fundamentally incorrect. Their movements don't match their bodies. Their eyes don't track motion the way human eyes should. And when they speak, if they speak, the words aren't theirs. I've heard my own voice come out of their mouths, words I've never said. Sentences that make no sense, stitched together from fragments of things that might have once been real. They aren't individuals, they are echoes, and I think I am becoming one of them. I don't know when it started, maybe when I heard the sound one too many times. Maybe when I found the facility. Maybe when I said its name out loud. Yes, it has a name. I found it buried deep in the notes I salvaged, scrawled in the margins of an abandoned report like a last desperate confession. Not a word, not a classification, just a pattern, a sequence of tones, a rhythm that doesn't belong in human speech. I can't repeat it, not out loud, not even in my head, because every time I try, my thoughts fracture. My memories slip, the world around me distorts just a little more, but I know it now, I understand it, and that's the problem. Because the moment I understood, it noticed me. The static isn't just in my broadcast anymore, it's in me, in my thoughts, in my voice. I play back old recordings of myself, and I hear something underneath, whispers where there should be silence, echoes of words I don't remember speaking. And worse, sometimes when I listen back, my voice says things I haven't said yet. I am being rewritten. Just like the city. Just like the others. It doesn't need a physical form. It never did. The body we saw, the creature we thought we were fighting, that was never the real threat. That was just a symptom, a consequence of something much deeper. The real entity, the intelligence behind this, it exists in a way we were never meant to perceive. Not a creature, not a monster, a concept. A self-propagating pattern, a structure of thought that infects anything that tries to understand it. A frequency that carries meaning, reshaping the minds that hear it, rewriting them into something new. It doesn't conquer the way we expect an invader to. It doesn't need to. It just spreads. And I think it's winning. I've tried to resist. I've tried grounding myself in what's real, physical objects, written words, the feel of cold metal in my hands. But reality itself is shifting beneath me. My own voice betrays me. My own thoughts aren't mine anymore. I see things in the static now. Faces, places I've never been, versions of myself that don't exist yet. And I don't know how much longer I can trust what I see. But I have to finish this. Because if I'm the last one left, then that means I'm the last warning. If you're out there, if anyone is still out there, listen to me. This isn't a war. This isn't an invasion. This is an idea that thinks, an intelligence that exists in the space between perception and reality. And the more we try to understand it, the more power we give it. Do not listen to the sound. Do not repeat the sound. Do not let it into your mind. Because once you hear it, Once you understand it, it understands you. And then it's too late. I don't know if I'll make it to another broadcast. I don't know if I'll still be me by the time I hit send on this one. But if you're listening, if you can still think in a way that belongs to you, then run. Get as far away from the city as you can. Get as far away from me as you can. And if you start to hear the hum, turn this off. Forget my name. Forget this ever happened. Because if you don't, you'll become a part of it too.